All right, hello. This is round one of the Magic the Gathering Online RCQ Vintage RCQ on November 13th, 2022. I found myself paired up against format regular and white aggro, or I guess more broadly aggro gamer Wessel. Often Thalia, Collector Oof, Archon of Emiria, those sorts of cards tend to be in their range. I don't know how broad their range is beyond that more generally, but lately it's certainly been a lot of white aggro. So let's get into the games. Let's see if there's some fun spots to review. The goal here is to improve, to find spots to improve. And I'm kind of, right off the bat, I get kind of a spicy one here. This hand looks great. It's got Gitaxian Probe. It's one of my favorite restricted cards. It just really changes the texture of games when it's about interaction. We have Force of Will. We've got an uncastable Pyroblast, but probably a good card in the format, on average, but maybe not here. I expect it to be a dead card here, and I have a Breach. So this hand, I think, in a Vintage League, not really thinking, maybe I'd just keep this, on the play with Gitaxian Pro and Force of Will, like what's not to like. But I think I like a mulligan here in retrospect, and I know I did take a mulligan in the event, and I felt like this was really kind of a disciplined mulligan. This feels like a hand that would very, very easily lose to this opponent's range. And this looks much better. It's got some vulnerabilities. It's really bad against specifically Collector Oof. I think it's really good against the rest of my opponent's range. I get a lot of mana out in advance of Archon of Emiria and Thalia, or other lock pieces. It's got some vulnerabilities to some of the green cards, but you take those, I think. And I bought him the dig through time here because it's just too far away from the rest of the from the rest of the game. I think we can maybe reliably cast Dig Through Time with this hand on turn 3, maybe turn 4, but that's just not quick enough in a game that's kind of going to hinge on maybe turns 2 through 4. It really is where both of our decks, if either one of us is to win this game, need to be doing our thing already. So I think this first turn is pretty simple here. We're just going to lead with Bobble. Check our opponent's top card. I would normally check mine just to get some information about whether I even want to consider. Because, for example, if I would have cracked this and targeted myself, my play here may have been slightly different. In fact, I think it probably would be different. I think I would maybe lead on the Ponder because I knew I would be wanting to draw into the top card and one other card, and then going with Consider. But maybe not even then. That's an A side. Doesn't really matter. I crack it, see Luminarch Aspirant, and know that I am for sure playing against aggro. See a Time Lock, keep it. Let's cast it. Sometimes vintage choices are pretty easy. I think this is one of them. Time Lock's not always good. It's kind of it's a busted card, but it resolves often because a lot of times when you cast this, it's basically just Explore. But in this case, I being able to untap and cast my Ponder before my opponent gets their turn, I think is super, super powerful here. And I draw off the Bobble. So I draw Force of Negation, maybe the worst card in the deck here. Nah, probably Pyroblast is the worst card in the deck. Force of Negation's not that far behind, but I draw a second blue card to go with it, so it could be a lot worse. So I'll be able to cast one of these two forces on my opponent's next turn, almost no matter what. So I lead with Ponder, and I see this, and it's really awkward. So I have some choices here. I cannot cast Merchant Scroll and Ancestral this turn because I need to dig 2 cards deep. If I call up Lurrus this turn off of the Tundra, I can't play Lurrus and Merchant Scroll next turn. I can play Lurrus or Merchant Scroll next turn. But I think the most important thing for me here is deploying the land. I really want to call up the Lurrus, and the Lurrus is castable off of both tundras and a third land. Even if they do something, if they have a wasteland off for one of the tundras, or they find a way to kill the jet, like a revoker on jet, we still have the Lurrus castable next turn, and we have a bauble in the yard already for it. So I like putting... First, I think I like keeping these three, because playing the land here and getting Lurrus next turn is just so important. And then Merchant Scroll lets us refill. So I want the land and I want the Merchant Scroll. We'll deal with the consequences of this Ruby at some point. I think it's going to be a poor draw, but I think we have enough power here with the Bauble Lurrus engine if we're allowed to, and we have Merchant Scroll that I think it's worth keeping these three in this order. Draw the land, play the Lurrus, or call up the Lurrus. Can't believe we used to just be able to cast this shit like that. It's so absurd. And pass the turn. Okay. Go time. So I'm pretty locked into casting one of these forces basically as soon as something is presented. And my opponent right away presents a Mox Ruby. This might be loose. But there are so many plays that my opponent has with Cavern of Souls here that make it really easy for both of these forces to get stranded in my hand. And my hand is so vulnerable to Collector Oof right here. So I think I choose to force it. Yeah. It works out really well for me. My opponent just has an Ancient Tomb and passes. But I still like this play in retrospect. Again, it would have worked out for me better if I didn't, I think. Because I would have been able to actually force the follow-up play. But my opponent may not have played Ancient Tomb. They may have played a Cavern of Souls turn 1 instead. And it would have been really bad for me. So here, I've got Lurrus in hand. I've got a Bauble in the yard. It's just easy. I think there is some consideration here for Merchant Scroll into Ancestral, but my thinking here is that I want to use this artifact mana now. I may not be able to use this artifact mana on a future turn. I may not be able to get this card from Bauble on a future turn. Even something like Athalia makes this so much more obnoxious. It makes both sides of this obnoxious. It makes the scroll for Ancestral annoying too, but it's also possible that I accrue enough card advantage here over the next turn cycles that I want my Merchant Scroll to go towards something else. It's unlikely, but it's technically possible. You know, I can scroll for Mystical for swords or something if I needed to. But so we get Lurrus. We see a Thought-Knot Seer. That kind of changes things. It makes this a little more... It informs what we're playing against. They very likely do not have green anymore. It's almost certainly just white cards and Eldrazi. My opponent plays an Archon and passes. This sucks. This sucks. So I think the way to beat Archon here is I really want to be maximizing my spells cast. I want to be casting high impact spells at sorcery speed and at instant speed, so I can get my value out of this. If I'm just playing sorcery speed and not like if this Archon is essentially also a Teferi and not just a Rule of Law, I think it's really, really bad for me. But even though it bricks my Lurrus, I think I'm okay with Merchant Scroll for Ancestral here. Playing Delta tapped, Merchant Scroll for Ancestral, passing the turn. Could maybe attack. I didn't think of that, but Lurrus is just too important. Even if you never know, they may have another Archon in hand or something. All right, we know what's coming here. Thought-Knot Seer, fire off Ancestral in response. They take the dress down. That all seems forced. And then they attack for 2. So Breach is really good. We're a little bit far from it because this Delta has to fetch a tapped Volk, or we have to play this Ruby, and neither of which are going to really change unless this Archon gets off the board. So I'm just going to play Bauble myself and try and scry into something. And we see a land, fetch, land, and go. All right. Iteration. It's great. It's going to be really difficult to... This Archon is so troublesome. Cavern on Human. Karn. So this does two really bad things. One, it bricks my Moxen. I can't really do anything. I mean, I can't do anything about this now. But between the Archon and the Karn and a brick wall of creatures, I don't know what the heck I'm supposed to do here. Kind of out of options, and they eat my Mox. I'm actually happy to see that. They're 1 mana away from a Mycosynth Lattice, and I don't know if they would have it in their sideboard. In retrospect, probably not. This Karn is mostly just going to be a Stony Silence, but it's a really good Stony Silence here. But I draw swords, which is kind of absurd here. So what I'm going to be able to do is I can set up swords, the Archon, play a Ruby, play a Breach, play a Swords on the Thought-Knot Seer, draw a card, and then pressure this Karn. So because I drew the Swords, I'm going to be able to just machine gun down the board. And this is going to start showing the power of Lurrus, because I can value Breach here without actually losing anything for future turns. Because my opponent can't deal with this Lurrus, and as long as that Lurrus is on the battlefield, I'm going to be able to Breach every turn. So I play the Sapphire. I don't know if I should have played the Bauble or the Sapphire. They're both bricked this turn. I've played the Sapphire with the thought that there may need to be a very large mana turn once I get this Karn off the board to be able to catch up to whatever else is happening. It's also possible that I should have played neither and left food in for the Swords to Plowshares. I'm not sure there. I'm gonna attack down Karn. And we're actually... I felt like I was in this game. Another Thought-Knot Seer. So here, I thought about forcing. If I don't force, my opponent takes the iteration. If I do force, I lose the iteration, but I lose my force. And my opponent, I don't have to deal with the Thought-Knot Seer. I don't actually have to use the Swords to Plowshares, although I know my opponent has a Luminarch Aspirant in hand, and I cannot Swords to Plowshares twice without also losing my Ancestral in the yard and the Time Walk in the yard. So it's a little... I would really rather not Swords twice next turn. So I think what I choose to do here is to force. I still like that in retrospect. It does spew cards. I mean, I traded 2 cards to remove it instead of letting it resolve and getting a card back for it at the cost of graveyard food. But I think it's fine. Here, same deal. I just play a Breach. Cool. I went a little fast. Sorry about that. I just did a value Breach. Breach, Swords, Ancestral to myself. And then I wasted down the Wasteland. I think there's some consideration for hitting one of the 2 caverns. But I don't have a counterspell anyway. And Wasteland on my Volk is actually one of the ways that I can, you know, until I drew this other Volk, was one of the things that could get really screw me here is if the Mox is still locked down by the Karn, if they can get rid of both Volks, I all of a sudden don't have a way to rebuy my Breaches. So my opponent pluses, makes Aspirant, pluses on Karn, and this game is, again, I think it's just trivial at this point. Because now I can actually get the Karn off the battlefield. This time I do have to exile the Ancestral, but I've drawn so many cards off of this Breach that none of it matters. And I think this game is just over from here. So here, I notably don't have a lot of interaction, but I have Hardcast Force, and I have a Breach in hand, so, you know, most of my deck is lethal. I caverned the Archon, because that did seem like one of the ways I could lose, is if I get locked under an Archon again, although I have Swords and Dreadhorde Arcanist, so, like, and Breach, like, it'd be very difficult, but notably, Archon means I cannot breach into Swords, so just making sure that I can keep the board clear of that. And then, I wasn't thinking of Containment Priest. Maybe I should have been. There's also Brutal Cathar, I think. No, Cathar Commando, I think is maybe in the range here. Maybe attacking with the Lurrus was a little bit loose, but even after seeing this Containment Priest, even after trading, I had to trade my Breach for it. The main cost here is I tapped out of Force for a turn. And as you see, I think I still attack here. On this turn, even though I saw the ambush was potential. I think this one's over. Just dig through time for Uno cards, it doesn't matter. Cool. So that ended that game. I remember the turn the Karn was resolved. I thought I was sure to lose the game. But the Karn didn't really come with any pressure, and that Underworld Breach Swords to Plowshares combination is just so brutal for these creature decks. They just, like, as long as you have sufficient food for the Breach, which is part of what Consider is meant to help with, you can just Swords everything. Cool. So game 2. See if it's as interesting. I remember how this one ended. I don't remember the lead up to it. On the draw, can't keep this. Would love to keep that. Can't really keep it. Keep this hand. I don't remember what I bought in, but this hand is about as good as it gets. I'm drawing a Shredder on turn 1. This actually is really interesting. So I think I'm priced into Swords to Plowshares on the Luminarch Aspirant. And if I'm priced into casting it, I mean, I guess I can still bobble myself. The problem with bobbling myself is that if I find a card that I want to keep, like, I'm fine. But it means I don't have something from my Ledger Shredder. And I don't know how important that's going to be this game. Getting the Shredder to a 2/4 feels like it could be reasonably important. No, I bobble myself. I see a Tundra. I think Tundra is worth keeping. I think. No, I fetch it away. I don't know what I think about that. So I'm priced into casting the Swords here often. So the problem is, if they have a Wasteland, I'm not going to be able to use this fetch with the Brainstorm. And I have a feeling one of the ways I stay in this game is a good Brainstorm. But we'll see. Yeah, see, and here, this is where it starts getting scary, because I'm now behind this Wasteland and the Luminarch Aspirant. And so I take the 3. Because if I end up also behind, say, an Archon here, I'm in such a bad place. Huh. I have Trinisphere. This was not on my radar, and it should have been. I think it firmly should have been on my radar, but it was not, and this caught me very off guard. So I think my play here is kind of forced. I think I need to Swords it, because it's going to be, if I can't cast the spell next turn, so that's 1 turn. I'll get hit for 4. Their Wasteland means I can't cast a spell until the following turn. People get hit for 5 more. That's 9. And then I need to spend my following turn. Not only do I need to hit a land, and I take a damage from this, so that's 10 more damage. I'm down to 6. But if I don't find the land on time, or I have to cantrip into the land somehow, I guess that would be unlikely with this Trinisphere. I mean, I'm basically just dead to this Luminarch Aspirant, so I think I just have to take my medicine and Swords it. And these turns are going to be kind of boring. Just draw, go, play land. I play the Misty. Maybe I should play the Island. I don't know. I don't know that it matters. I think a Misty's better because they have Strip Mine. And it's a Palace Jailer. Haven't seen one of those in a while. Here, I think I just... Yeah. Play my Shredder. With the plan being I can at least take back the Monarch. Or take the Monarch for a turn. Nothing interesting happens there. And now I will get to take the Monarch and do something. It's not going to be anything very interesting, but uncounterable Thalia. So Thalia actually doesn't matter here. The tax contributes to Trinisphere. I can't do anything about it anyway, but the card just doesn't matter here. This, though. This matters. So I'll start with the Ledger Shredder. I mean, this is the first step. Obviously, we want to see what we connive into. Yeah. And here, I kind of sit up in my chair a little bit. Like, this is like bingo, right? Like, if this Archon resolves, and I'm playing behind the Archon, the Trinisphere, the Thalia, and the Monarch, because I'll be able to draw a card every turn, but so will my opponent, and my opponent has the ability to double spell now. I do not. The Swords was so clutch, because even if I were to have brainstormed into Swords, the being able to cast the Swords on this turn, and still cast something next turn, I think is quite important. So I pitched the Force, just not going to be a Force game, and oops. Yeah, not my finest. So they take back the Monarch, I fetch, realize my mistake, and just scoop. Yeah, it's fine. It's not worth getting tilted over. Mistakes happen. That was a pretty painful one. But I won game 1 after a pretty dire situation. I can win game 3. So I keep... I think about this hand for a long time because this is one of those hands where it feels like it should be lethal. And you just want to make sure that it's lethal. Right? This is just the nuts. This is so cool. So here... If my opponent has no interaction, I can go Flooded Strand, fetch up a Volk, Black Lotus, play Time Walk, play Consider for anything, literally any 2 cards, or any card, bin it and draw a card, Mystical Tutor for Brain Freeze. And that'll let me untap with my Time Walk, play Wasteland, Breach, bring back Lotus, cast the Brain Freeze on myself, and it's lethal. So as long as they have no interaction, this is just the nuts. And I sat here for like 3 minutes, just making sure, just making sure that there's nothing that's going to stop me. And lo and behold, there's nothing they can really do to stop me. I did not expect them to, but Mental Misstep is probably the big one. Mind Break Trap is the other one. And I think this line firmly loses to both. That's fine. It's whatever. So let's see if this extra card, if this were a preordain, this prismatic ending would be on the bottom of the library, and we'd have one fewer card here. So let's just see if this ends up mattering. I don't think it does. No, because we're going to be able to breach with at least one card extra floating. So breach, boom, boom, boom. Yeah, so we had one, technically two cards bonus, but being able to hold back a busted card like this, in case something does go wrong. Here it's never going to matter because something goes wrong, we're just passing the turn. All the things that could go wrong, I think, result in this Lotus not actually ever making it onto the stack. Yeah, because I mean, they would have used Mind Break Trap last turn, but if we Lotus and then they Mind Break, yeah, there's just no way it could ever end up mattering. So we're 2 cards up, and from here it's trivial. Brain Freeze ourselves, bring back Lotus a couple of times, Brain Freeze ourselves, and the game ends. So turn 1 kill, pretty cool. Didn't need a tinker. That was the first round, and when a round like that, I usually feel like I'm in really, really good shape. If you know, when you win the really easy ones, sometimes you feel really good. When you win the really tough ones, where you were kind of down a little bit, I was down a little bad in game 1, and then obviously lost in part to a misclick in game 2. Certainly didn't help. I felt really, really good. So thank you for watching round 1. We'll continue this with round 2.